Hello and welcome to Let's Translate Manga, a series where I have my patrons translate manga and then I review their translations. We are looking at Tada no Mefure desu, and I already did an episode on how the title of this series might be translated, but check that out if you want to. I'll have a link in the show notes or the video description. Also check out the video description for more information on who translated this episode and about this series in general. And now I'm just going to jump right into it. So we're not starting on page 1 of volume 1 of this series. We're starting on page 14. And on the first page, so basically just to set up the story a little bit, the heroine, she is interested in having somebody to go out to eat with only. Like, she doesn't really have friends. She doesn't want to go out to eat by herself because that's awkward. But she has just been eating a lot of instant food by herself, and she's like, I want to be able to go out to eat and eat some nice food, but I don't want to do it by myself. I know, I'll look for somebody to do this with on Tinder, which is, of course, an amazing idea. She thinks she's not having any luck, and she meets this one person online who agrees to go out with her just to eat food platonically. And so this is now 1 week later after they make the date on Tinder and they are meeting for the first time. So the label on page 14, Ishukan go, 1 week later, and then her date, who she thought was a dude, shows up in this blonde curly wig with these sound effects teka teka. And he says, Hajimemashite, Jiro daisuki taro desu. So this Jiro daisuki taro, you may notice it's in the Japanese quotes. The reason being, this is his screen name. So that's why it's a very weird name, because it's a screen name. We'll see how the patrons translated that. And then she says, she's thinking to herself, wig? Like he's wearing a wig. And then she introduces herself, Neko-chan kawa ningen desu. All right, so let's see how the patrons translated these screen names, pretty much. That's like what this is that we're looking at here. So patron A, 1 week later, sparkle sparkle for the sound effect. It's nice to meet you. I am Jiro lover Taro. And then she says, he's in a wig? And then she says, I'm kitty kawa human. Okay, so patron A went for a more literal approach with the names kawa. So kawa, I'm assuming that this means like cute, kawaii. So kawa, cute, cutesy, super cute. Totes adorbs, but really think internet slangy. You can get super creative with these names. Just like I went over in the episode on translating titles, anytime you have to translate a name into English, which is rare actually, usually we keep names in Japanese. In this case, I really think the names should be translated into English because these are their screen names and they're very internet, punny, they actually mean things. Like his name, Jiro lover Taro. Yeah, that's what his name is. He's like Taro, the Jiro lover, or Taro loves Jiro, or something like that. And she is, kitties are super, super cute. And then the ningen is like a person who thinks that cats are really super cute. That's kind of like what her screen name means. So you want to think about what the English equivalent to that kind of screen name would be. And then screen names in English and Japanese are a bit different, but we'll go over that in a minute after I go over the other patron translations. So patron B, 1 week later, sparkle sparkle. Hi, I'm Taro loves Jiro, and look how loves is spelled, and it's all one word. That looks much more like a screen name than patron A's. And then she thinks that's a wig, right? And then she says, I'm cutie cute cat lover. And look how lover is spelled. I like that. It looks more like a screen name. Patron C, 1 week later, dazzle for the sound effect. Nice to meet you. I'm Jiro lovin' Taro. Again, look at how it's spelled and look how it's all one word. And then she's thinking, a wig? And then she says, hi, I'm cute cat Kawandari. And then this patron left a note. Their usernames might be tied to their real names, like Harukawa is the girl's name, and Kawakawa might come from the kawa of Harukawa, and assuming her real name, and assuming his real name is maybe something Taro. So I wanted to be sure to preserve the sound of their name here, as in quandary. considered something like cute cat for alliteration, but that led to some unfortunate initials. Uh-huh. But yeah, that's another thing to consider. Yeah, like their screen names might be or are indeed puns of their actual names. And depending on how often their screen names come up later in the series and how the screen names are used, that might actually matter. That their screen names kind of sound like their real names. So these are all things to take into consideration when you're localizing their screen names. And I do think you should localize, like usually when you translate anything, any piece of entertainment, you don't usually translate a person's name. Even though Japanese names mean things, you usually don't translate them because it's their name, right? But in some cases, and this is one of those cases, you really do want to localize the name. Because something like a screen name, like it actually means something, and it's not necessarily a name that you just call someone. It actually means something too, and it matters that it means something. And it's important that we know what it means. So I do like how patrons B and C made the screen names all one word, like a screen name would be. And I like how they left out some consonants or spelled things differently, because that's what you have to do when you're making a screen name, because there's other people with that screen name. Now, a note on Japanese screen names. If you don't follow, what is her name? Minami Sakai, I think? That's what she goes, her pen name anyway. Yeah, Sakai Minami. So she is a really cool story. She is a Black American, I think? I don't want to assume, but I know she's a Black Westerner whose first language is English. And she's a weeb like we are, and it was her dream to be a mangaka in Japan. She moved to Japan, and she recently achieved her dream. She is published now, a mangaka in Japan, in Japanese, in Hanato Yume Comics. She's made a series, Bakshi for short, but it's like, I exploded, I spontaneously combusted, and then I got reincarnated in my favorite otome game. I read it, it's really silly and zany, it's pretty cool series. But anyway, the heroine of that series, her screen name is Imomushi, or Imomushi-chan, I think, which means potato bug. And that's the funny joke, because all the love interests in this series that she gets reincarnated into call her potato bug, because that's her screen name. That's what they would call her in the otome game. And it's just really hilarious that they call her potato bug. She herself is also, this mangaka, is also a translator. She has experience translating Japanese media to English. And even though she writes this manga in Japanese, she is bilingual and English is her preferred language. So she has translated her own manga series, like snippets of it, into English and posted those on Twitter. They aren't official translations, which is kind of weird. It's like, if anybody is the most qualified to translate that series, it's her, the original author of that series, who is bilingual and whose preferred language is actually English. But interestingly, it's a great case study. If you don't follow her on Twitter, follow her over there. But it's a great case study in how you can and indeed should favor a heavier hand in localization and translating entertainment. Even though this is her own manga that she created herself, you'll notice in her own English localization of her own manga, there are some significant differences, but all for the better. One of those differences is the screen name of the heroine. It's just Imomushi, it's just potato bug in Japanese. But in English, it's like potato bug 62 or something. There's numbers after it. And the reason why, I think, is that in Japanese, I think it's a lot less likely that a bunch of people would be like making their screen name potato bug, but in English, there's so many more people, so many more English-speaking people online, that I think it's a lot more likely that people would use potato bug as the screen name, and they'd be like, I'm sorry, potato bug is already taken. Why don't you use potato bug 62 instead, or whatever? So the screen name is different in her own series that, you know, she wrote herself. She chose a different screen name. So I really do think liberties can be taken with these screen names, and I like what the patrons did. Like, I think they all work, except, again, first patron, I would just suggest make all those words one word, because that's kind of how screen names work. I mean, you could do underscores, I suppose, for the spaces. But yeah, it is like cutie cute cat lover. But I do like patron C's attempt to make them sound like the person's actual name, because again, that might come up later in the series. So it's a smart strategy. I don't know how well Kawandari is working. in English. It's kind of hard, man. It's hard to do wordplay in multiple languages at once. Don't know how well that's working in terms of like understanding it, but screen names are often hard to understand. There are so many people I follow online and I won't think much about their screen name, and maybe a year later it hits me, oh, that's what their name means. So I like it. It's all good. Page 15. So they're looking at each other and they're both just ellipses. It's like, what do you say? This is so awkward. She's thinking to herself, joso? Is he cross-dressing? And she says, etto. And then she says, Jiro-san de ii desu ka? And then he says, taro de. And she says, hai. And then she says, dewa taro-san de. And then they're walking down the street and you see all of these flashy signs. Crystal, new something or another. It's blocked off by a balloon, but it's a hotel. Free something or another, free something or another. You can tell they're kind of starting to walk down a sleazy street. So patron A, is he cross-dressing? Is Jiro all right? Taro is fine. Oh, okay. It's really more like, not Taro is fine, but like I prefer Taro de. It's a minor nitpicky thing. Oh, okay. Well then, nice to meet you, Taro. I like nice to meet you, Taro, as a choice for Taro-san de. Taro-san de is really more like literally, okay then, I'll call you Taro, or Taro it is more what it is. But I do like this, nice to meet you, Taro. There's still a tentative feel to it because of the, well then. This whole scene is just so awkward. We need awkwardness dripping off of the page. And I am seeing some very lovely awkwardness here in Patron A's translation. Patron B, he dressed as a girl? I like the way that's split up. I've mentioned this before in prior episodes of this, but whenever there's like a balloon, a speech balloon, or a thought balloon in this case, that's split up into like almost two separate complete thoughts, I like, instead of like splitting up an entire sentence with an ellipses, I like it if you approach it as two separate sentences, like he, ... question mark, and then dressed as a girl. I think that just reads nicely when you split it up that way. Instead of, in Japanese, they're splitting up the word cross-dressing, basically. It would be like cross ... cross-dressing. So I like the way this was done. Can I call you Jiro? No, Taro. Oh, okay then. Okay then works as well. Because again, the vibe was, okay, Taro. Or okay, Taro it is. So okay then is fine. It's nice and awkward. And I like the no, Taro, because that was more the vibe in Japanese. It's okay to call me that. And then patron B elected to translate all the signs. Crystal, free entry, pink, free info. And then she says, Taro it is. That was my suggested translation for Taro de, so that works out nicely for me. More signs, den, hotel Numax. Yeah, I think the most important thing about the signage is that the reader can tell that they're kind of walking down a bit of a sleazy street. We need to know that some of these places are hotels, and we need to know that some of this stuff is free, because that gives, hey, we're walking down a sleazy street. Maybe some cheap hotels, some love hotels, that kind of thing. So it is important that these signs are translated, but again, you can't see a lot of the signs because they're kind of covered up. I would maybe make a note to my letterer and just say, hey, just make it clear that they're walking down a sleazy street with some cheap hotels. Patron C, is he ... in drag? May I call you Jiro? And then he says, it's Taro. That works as well. Oh, okay. Well then, Taro. And then patron C says, I don't know if we're supposed to translate the signs, but they look pretty irrelevant to the plot, so I'm skipping them for the time being. And yeah, like, I think they are somewhat relevant to the plot, again, just to show that they're walking down a sleazy street. I mean, the very next line of dialogue on page 16 reveals that, yes, it is important to the plot, what these buildings are. So let's move on to page 16. Okay, so her very next line of dialogue, you see she looks incredibly uncomfortable, and she's saying, mecha mecha rabuho machi, or rabuho gai? I don't know how you pronounce that kanji in this case. Anyway, this kanji is like a street or a district. It's either pronounced machi or gai. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it in this case, actually, but it doesn't matter because I know what it means. Ha ha. And then, so she's basically saying, this is giving hella love hotel vibes, or this is giving love hotel. And then he says, Kuchi desu, Kawakawa-san. So he's calling her Kawakawa, which is part of her screen name. It's the cute, or cutesy cute, cutie cute part of her screen name, but also, from her real surname of Harukawa. And then she says, yep, or she thinks to herself, yappari souyu kanji nano kana? And she's like, I should have known that, he was going to be this kind of guy or this kind of date, as in the kind of date who's only interested in sex. I mean, she met him on Tinder. And then she thinks, uwa, do yatte nigeyo. She's like, oh man, how am I going to get out of this? Kyuni nigettara, kyuni hashittara hen kana? It's like, would he think I was weird if I just straight up ran away? Konbini ni iku furi toka. It's like, maybe I could pretend I was going to a convenience store. And then she goes, nani yatten daro, watashi. Nani o kitai shite tan daro. It's like, what the hell am I doing? What was I expecting to get out of this? Okay, patron A. This is the friggin' Love Hotel District. Yep, definitely the vibe. Mecha is very, it's like friggin', hella, fucking, it's that kind of vibe. And then he says, it's just this way, Kawakawa. And then she thinks, of course things end up like this. Wow, how do I get myself out of this one? It'd be weird if I made a run for it. She's more asking, would it be weird if I made a run for it? Maybe if I pretend to head into a convenience store? Okay, so patron A missed this little thought at the bottom. Nani yatten daro watashi. Patron B. This street is all love hotels. Yeah, again, I think patron A captured the vibe a little better. The friggin' Love Hotel District. The signage, Cafe Eden. And then he says, this way, cutie cute. A hotel New Max for more signage. She thinks, I can't believe I thought this time would be different. I like that. I can't believe I thought this time would be different. That's a really good way of rephrasing. Yappari souyu kanji nano ka. This yappari is like, I should have known. It's like, I practically knew this was going to happen. And so she's like, I can't believe I thought this time would be different. I can't believe I didn't think that he was going to be like this, is kind of what it is in Japanese. But I can't believe I thought this would be different. Yeek. I like yeek for ooh-ah. It is kind of like yikes. Yikes is usually my go-to for ooh-ah. But I like yeek. How do I get out of this? Do yatte nigeyo. Yeah, literally it's how do I run away, but how do I get out of this is perfectly valid. Nigeru is not just to literally run, it's really to escape. So get out of is perfectly valid for nigeru. Would it be too weird to straight up run away? That's correct. Maybe I can pretend to dip into a mini mart. I like this dip into. Konbini ni iku furi toka. And, incidentally, if you're not a woman and you're watching this episode or listening to this episode, this is 100% real. This is 100% realistic. I think just about any woman or girl in their life has had this inner monologue in her head, either when some strange man is following her home or when she is out with some strange person and is like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be, or uh-oh, my worst fears are confirmed in Harukawa's case. This is very, very realistic. Man, what was I thinking? Nani yatten daro watashi. Again, it's not literally, man, what was I thinking, but it is definitely the vibe. In Japanese, it's more like, what the hell am I doing? What was I thinking? Very similar. No way would someone just want a meal. Nani o kitai shite tan daro. I like this as well. In Japanese, she's saying, what was I hoping for? Or why did I get my hopes up? And in English, this patron is rephrasing it, flipping it to be like, why did I get my hopes up? There's no way someone would just want a meal with me, so why was I getting my hopes up? See, those two thoughts really complement and go with each other. It's kind of the flip side of the same coin then to say, no way someone would just want a meal. So I like this wording here, this choice. Patron C, love hotels everywhere. I kind of like that. Like the letterer could make that really work and be very whimsical. Because with that extremely uncomfortable look, yet there's a little bit of a smile on her face with the extreme discomfort. It's kind of like when you're so scared or so angry that you just laugh, because what else are you going to do? So love hotels everywhere. Like that could work with some good lettering. And then the guy says over here, Kawandari. Again, that's what patron C elected to make her screen name. Then she thinks, so that's his plan after all. Yeah, again, that's more what it was in Japanese. It's like, yep, I knew it. I called it. Yep, buddy. So that's his plan after all. Yikes for ua. How should I bail? I like bail for nigeru. And I like how tight this line is as well. Is it too weird to just up and bolt? I like that. Maybe if I fake needing to stop by a convenience store, or this is a little meandery. Maybe if I fake needing to stop by, maybe if I fake stopping by a convenience store, you don't need the needing in there. Maybe if I fake, like patron B, maybe I can pretend to dip into a mini mart. Patron A, maybe if I pretend to head into a convenience store. You don't need this like needing to stop by a convenience store. I get where this is coming from. Like if this were happening IRL to me, I might be like, oh, pardon me, I have to go into a convenience store. I forgot to get something. But I think if I were really trying to escape this guy, I wouldn't say, oh, I forgot something at a convenience store. I have to go here, because then he'd be like, oh, cool, I'll wait for you while you get your thing and then we'll go to the Love Hotel. If I was really trying to escape someone, yeah, this is another thing. Dipping into a public place like a convenience store is a great tactic, a great survival tactic, because you can then just go talk to the person behind the register, be like, hey, there's this creep following me, help. You know, so I think that's kind of what she's getting at here. Not, oh, I can like tell him, oh, I gotta go to a convenience store and use that as an excuse, but rather escape into the convenience store, like just ditch him. Like that would be an easier way of ditching him than just like literally running down the street, because that's a little too obvious. But if you dip into a convenience store, it's a little more discreet and you can ask somebody else for help. And then, you know, that's a lot safer. Anyway, I digress. The rest of her thought. Ugh, what am I doing here? I like that, and I like the italicized doing. What am I doing here? What did I expect to get out of this? Yeah, this is very much what it was in Japanese. See, and this works as well, too. I like what patron B did, sort of expanding upon what was in the subtext of the Japanese, and I like that patron C kept it closer to the Japanese, but really made it sound natural in English with the italics and the way everything was worded. And patron A forgot to translate this. It's honestly quite easy to forget to translate a panel or a sentence in a light novel. If you're working on something, it's easy to get lost and forget where you left off. Like, let's say you're translating this, you have to get up to feed your cat or pee or something, and then you come back. It's very easy to forget where you left off, especially if a lot of these things are similar. Like these thoughts that she's having in the panels before are very similar to the thoughts that she's having in this bottom panel. So absolutely no shade to patron A for forgetting to translate this. But again, this is why you proofread your own work. You go back after you translate and you read through everything and you make sure that everything matches up with the Japanese panels to avoid mistakes like that. Okay, next page 17. So she's moping and thinking some more. 結局男の人が誘ってくる理由なんて一つしかないもんね. So this mon is an emphatic sort of like, you and I both know, everybody knows, if a guy asks you out, he's only after one thing. There's only one reason a guy would ever ask you out. That's wrong. That's not true. That's a bit defeatist, that way of thinking. Although, you know, if you're on Tinder, most people are just there for sex, so that's fair. And then she's still thinking, そうじゃない人と出会ってみたかったな. It's like, I just wish that I could have met somebody who was not after that. And then the guy says, ah, which it can be translated as oh, or hey, or ah, or look. It really depends on the context. Okay, patron A. In the end, men just ask me out for only one thing. I think she's being more general in Japanese, but it's not really a bad thing that she's phrasing this more like me, making it a me statement instead of a everybody sort of statement. Kekkyoku, in the end is, I try to avoid translating kekkyoku as in the end. It often works as in the end, but not always. And then she's thinking, I just wanted to meet a guy that wasn't like that. I like that phrasing. I just wanted to meet a guy that wasn't like that. And then he says, Patron B, there's only ever one reason a man wants to go out. I guess I just hoped I'd meet someone different for once. I really like this. For once, I was hoping that this time would be different. And it goes with the former translation of, I can't believe I thought this time would be different. I guess I just hoped I'd meet someone different for once. And I like, again, if you look at the panel, how this text is separated, そうじゃない人と pause, 出会ってみたかったな. That pause is natural and works quite well in Japanese, but in English, not necessarily because the word ordering is different. So I liked what Patron B did here. I guess I just hoped I'd meet someone different for once. Patron C, in the end, when a guy asks a girl out, he only wants one thing. When a guy asks a girl out, he only wants one thing. Yeah, patrons B and C worded this statement more as a general, guys only ask girls out for sex, basically. Whereas patron A phrased it as, all the men who ask me out only want sex. I think those both work. I think the patrons B and C are more close to what the Japanese was, but I actually, the more I'm looking at this, the more I really like how patron A made it more personal. Like made it more like, this is my plight, my experience. Every guy who's asked me out has only wanted sex from me. So even though that wasn't quite the vibe in the original Japanese, I still like it because I think it really goes with the emotions here in this panel. Of like, if you look at her the way she looks, I think it hits quite well to make it centered on her, not just on women at large. More thoughts. If only I could meet someone who isn't like that. I like this too. Oh shit, I like this. So in Japanese, it's more like it's mitakatta, so past tense. I wish I could have, or I wanted to meet someone who wasn't like that. But by making it more like hopeful future tense, if only I could meet someone who isn't like that. That's what this series is going to be about, basically. So I think it makes the reader a little more interested, I think. The other wording, the phrasing of, oh, I wish I could have met someone who wasn't like that, that kind of makes it like, oh, well, the end. The story is over. But by phrasing it more hopeful, if only I could meet someone who isn't like that, I think it leads more into what's about to happen in this scene. Okay, next page. Taro, screen name Taro, says, Koko desu. This is the place. And then she's thinking, nazo mise? So there's a lot of dialogue happening in between the nazo mise, but that's one, complete thought that goes together. And then all the other dialogue is kind of happening in the background while she's thinking this. Nazo is like a mystery or unidentified, like an unidentified flying restaurant. But yeah, mystery restaurant, unidentified restaurant, sketchy restaurant. It's called, looks like Okada sushi or Okuda sushi. Part of the kanji is missing, so you gotta guess. It might show up later in a different panel. More sound effects, kira kira, bika bika. Pika pika is more like sparkle sparkle. Bika bika would be like a rough version of sparkle sparkle. Kira kira is more sparkle sparkle. The guy says, Taro says, Suimasen, yoyaku shita Taro desu. And then the person inside says, ai. So he's like, excuse me, I made a reservation under the name of Taro. And the person's like, yeah, coming right up. And then Taro asks, biru de ii desu ka? Notice how he's speaking politely to her. Important to keep that nuance in there. And then she says, hi. So he asks, are you cool with beer? She's like, yeah. Like, that's a bad move, girl. I would not have beer when you're still having bad feelings about this date and this guy, but okay. You do you, girl. So patron A. Okay, so patron A didn't translate the koko desu, this is the place, starting with what for the first part of her thought. The second part of her thought, what a sketchy restaurant. I like that. Like, again, literally in Japanese, it's more like mystery restaurant. But sketchy really is more the vibe here. It's not, oh, what a mysterious restaurant, but it's like, it's more like sketchy AF. It's like, we don't know what's going on in this restaurant. I like what a sketchy restaurant. Notice how big that balloon is too, so you can totally fit in a longer sentence like that. And then the sound effects, flash, flash. Yeah, I like the flash, flash for flashy, because that makes it seem more sleazy. The guy says, excuse me, I reserved under the name of Taro. And the guy says, come on in. Is beer okay with you? Sure. That works. Patron B, here we are. And then she's thinking, what kind of, the second part of her thought, place is this? So that's another approach you can take. Instead of stuttering and having one balloon with just a WH and a hyphen, because that is a little odd in English, you can just like make it into one complete sentence and then break it up naturally as you might break it up in English. So that's a valid one as well. What kind of place is this? It's not quite, like, I really like acknowledging that the place is sketchy, that Patron A did. But what kind of place is this is going with nazo mise. It's like unidentified restaurant. Like, what kind of restaurant is this? Sound effects, flash, flash. Taro says, hello, I have a reservation under Taro. The place is called Okada Sushi. Yeah, I thought it was Okada Sushi. Twinkle, twinkle for more sound effects. And then the guy says, come on. And then he says, is beer okay for you? Is beer okay for you? I think beer okay with you sounds more natural to me. But I don't think is beer okay for you wrong. And then she says, yes, please. Yeah, keeping the please in there preserves the polite vibe that we have. And I think having a little bit of a polite vibe in their dialogue is important because it clashes with the just awkwardness and sketchiness of this scene and makes it a lot funnier. Yeah, is beer okay for you to me sounds more like he's asking, are you a drinker? Like, or, you know, can you drink beer? Is like, is that okay for you? That's kind of what that sounds more like for me when really he's more like, are you okay with drinking beer? As in, maybe that's the only drink they've got or something like that. Or I'm getting beer. You cool with that too? I think that's more the vibe than like, is it okay if you drink beer? That's just more what is beer okay for you sounds like to me. Which again, it could just be a me thing. That is why having a team of people edit your work is a good thing, actually. All right, Patron C, here it is. And then she's thinking to herself, what, in balloon 1, and in balloon 2, what is this place? I think if is were italicized, what is this place? I think that would really carry that home a little bit better. I think I prefer what a sketchy restaurant. If you could work the word sketchy into any of these translations, I think that's a winner. Sound effect, sparkle, shine. Taro says, excuse me, I have a reservation under Taro. I like that that's a question because that is kind of how we would say this in English. We often would have that lilt in our voice. Reservation for Taro? Like there's often a lilt in our voice when we're confirming a reservation at a restaurant, like it's a question. So I like that both patrons B and C had that question mark in there. And then the shop owner says, yeah, for I. So when you meet the shop owner later, this yeah actually makes a lot of sense. And it is kind of, hey, it's very like slurred, like, yeah, come on in. It does kind of have that vibe. So I like yeah. Although yeah to me sounds more like, I would read that as yeah. I would read it as more sarcastic, but it's more like, come in. Like, come on in, dude. It's not a surfer dude, but it's a very like slurred, casual, come in sort of thing. And then he says, beer sound good? And then she's like, sure. I like that too. This has less of a polite vibe, but it has more of the, she is kind of like, sure. When she's saying, yes, hi. Sure. Let's move on to page 19. So she's looking at the menu, and it's an old school kind of menu. If you go to an older style Japanese restaurant, that's how this will look. And a lot of newer restaurants will try to mimic this with these little, like, you know, pieces of paper vertically hanging with just the names of the dishes in hiragana written very simply. But look at the sound effects. Boro. That's a sound effect for something just like falling apart and being in tatters. And then the restaurant person says, "Hai, biru ne," and then goto. It's in bold. This sound effect is like clunk. So it's like this shop owner is just gruffly, unceremoniously being like, here's your beer. Clunk. That's the vibe. And this restaurant is falling apart. So that's the vibe we're getting here. And then Taro, he's starting to say something as an aside in very small kanji. He's offering to pour her beer for her, which is a very Japanese cultural thing. So yeah, like this scene is even sketchier in Western culture than it would be in Japanese culture. Because in Japanese culture, it's very, you know, it's not even like a date culture thing. It's just it's a seniority thing. And I guess he's kind of her senior in this situation since he was the one who asked her out to the restaurant and he's the dude, I suppose. But, you know, offering to pour someone's drink for them is very, like, polite in Japanese society. So he's not actually trying to be a creep and, like, I'll pour your own beer. But then she's like, "Jibun de!" really loudly, "Jibun de yarimasu." So it's like, nope, don't slip a roofie in my drink is basically what's happening in this exchange. But again, like in Japanese, culturally, this moment is a lot more innocent. Like, he really could just be innocently, politely wanting to pour her beer for her, and then she's like, "Nope, I can do it myself. Please don't slip a roofie in my drink." And then he goes goku, which is a sound effect for drinking, and she goes koku, which is another sound effect for drinking. But note how it's goku, which makes it like a stronger sound, and it's, you know, in clunkier, bolder text. So he's gulping his drink loudly and more clunkily, and she's drinking her drink more softly. All right, so patron A, this Boro sound effect, worn down. This is valid. You can sometimes translate sound effects as like English phrases, if that really carries across what needs to be carried across well. There's probably better ways of doing it than worn down, but that was a fine choice. The guy says, "Here's your beer," clunk. Yep, clunk is good. And then he offers, "I can pour," and then she says, "Don't worry, I can do it myself." I think the vibe was like, "No thanks, I can do it myself." She's like really trying to shut him down very quickly before he has a chance to consider pouring her drink for her. Because again, ladies, that's dangerous potentially. So many PSAs in this episode. All right, and then gulp and sip. I like that choice because gulp is a louder way of sipping and sip is a more dainty, quiet way of sipping a drink. So I like those sound effect choices. Okay, patron B, bedraggled. I like that for Boro, bedraggled. And then patron B translated the menu here. It really depends on who your letterer is and if you're going on like a full retouch lettering where you erase the original Japanese letters and write in the new stuff, or if you're writing it beside. If it's the kind of lettering where it's not full retouch, I don't think this menu would be translated necessarily. But yeah, patron B translated the menu. Yellowtail, octopus, squid, whale, scallop, tuna, amberjack. Anyway, the guy says, "Here's your beers," clink. And then he says, "Shall I?" And then she says, "It's okay, I can pour my own." I like that. And then gulp and gulp. Again, I think it's better to differentiate between these two gulps, that one is a louder gulp, the other is a more dainty, quiet gulp. But I like that. "It's okay, I can pour my own." You can really hear that exchange. Patron C, tattered for Boro. Yeah, I like that. The guy says, "Here's your beer," clunk. Yeah, clunk versus clink. It is more like a clunk in Japanese, but clink from patron B, because beer bottles are glass, so it really would make perhaps a more clinky sort of sound. So both of those are valid. And then he's saying, "Guess I'll ... and she says, "It's okay, I'll pour my own." I like that. Again, it's getting across, he's kind of nervously, awkwardly being like, "Shall I pour you your drink, milady?" And she's like, "Nope, not today." Gulp and sip. Yeah, I like the gulp sip choice because it shows the difference in drinking volume. Okay, next page, page 20. More awkwardness. I love how awkward this is. Okay, so they're both sitting at the table, sipping in silence with an ellipses between them. The guy says, "Koko futari kara nan desu yo." And she says, "Huh?" And then he says, "Yoyaku futari kara nan desu." And she goes, "So nan desu ka?" So this is a little awkward wording here, and even she doesn't really understand the first time he says. So look at the two things he says. Koko futari kara nan desu yo, futari kara nan desu. Yoyaku, the reservation. So what he's saying here, he's explaining to her, you can only get a reservation at this restaurant if there's two of you. And this nan desu, that's the way of explaining something to someone. So the subtext here, he's explaining to her, in case you're wondering why I dragged you to this sketchy restaurant and had a reservation and everything, it's not because I'm a creep, it's because this restaurant only lets you make a reservation if there's two people. That's what this nan desu is doing. It's doing a lot of heavy lifting, but he's basically explaining politely to her, hey, I'm sorry, I know this looks weird, but this restaurant only accepts reservations of two people. And then she goes, so nan desu ka? And again, this nan desu. So it's like, oh, is that why? It's like, oh, I just assumed that you were a creep and that you dragged me here to do bad things to me in this sketchy restaurant. But now she's kind of feeling bad. Like, oh, I jumped to the wrong conclusion. Like, oh, really? So that's the vibe here. Patron A. I made this for two people. And she goes, huh? The reservation. I made it for the two of us. So we're missing that little, this place only allows reservations for two people. It's not I made the reservation for two people. It's this restaurant only allows reservations for two. So we're definitely missing a big nuance, and we're definitely missing a big, like, moment where her first moment of like, oh, maybe this guy isn't a creep. So yeah, we were missing that. Patron B, more menu translation, and then he says, they only let pairs in here. She goes, huh? And then he says, for a table. It has to be two or more. And then she says, is that right? I like that. I like the yoyaku futari kara nan desu. I like breaking up those two balloons in a natural way in English. For a table, period. It has to be two or more, period. I think that's it flows nicely. Patron C, you need at least two people here. And she goes, huh? And then he says, to get a table. Again, similar choice. You can't come alone. I like you can't come alone. I like that rephrasing of it. That really hammers home, hey, you might think this is weird, but, I needed somebody to come with me to be able to even go to this restaurant. And so now it's adding a little more credence to the premise of, oh, we really are just going out on a platonic date to eat food. Like, there aren't any strings attached. I don't have any ulterior motives. So I really like this phrasing, you can't come alone, because that just really hammers home. It's like, he couldn't have come here by himself, even if he wanted to. And then she says, oh, really? I think that goes pretty well with her expression there. Very nice. All right, and now the beautiful restaurateur in page 21 comes into the story. I love this guy. Okay, so she's thinking to herself, dakara aite ga hoshikatta no kana? So yeah, she's making that leap. It's like, oh, so that's why he wanted a date, because he literally can't go to this restaurant without a date. Then the restaurant owner goes, oh, which again is a very like gruff way of being like hi, but it's like a very it's like, hey. Hey there, what's up? Or it's kind of like a big grunt, like, eh. And then he shows up, zun, which is this very like, just like creepy sort of like nudging yourself into the frame, creepily sort of sound effect. And then he says, "Kyaku to futari kiri ni naru no ga yada kara na." So he's adding to the explanation. He's like, I don't like being alone here with just one customer. That's why he has that policy. And if you look at him, you can see why he might only have one customer, because he's so creepy. And then she's thinking to herself, "Sonna riyu de?" She's like, that's why? Like, that's why this place only takes reservations for 2 or more people? Like, that's kind of weird, man. And then he hands them their plate of beautiful sushi. I'm not even a big sushi person. Like, I prefer maki. I don't prefer, like, this kind of sushi, but, like, just looking at that, I want to eat that. And then he goes, ai, omatase. Again, he's speaking just kind of gruffly, like, here's your food, kind of thing. And then gong, the sound effect of, like, it can be a gong sort of sound effect or a bong sort of sound effect, but just the sound effect of, like, tada, like your food is being set down on the table and there's so much of it and it's all sparkling and it's gorgeous. All right, patron A. I wonder if that's why he wanted an eating partner. Yeah. And then the guy says, hey, I'm not the biggest fan of being here with just you two. So this isn't really what he was saying. Futari kiri ni naru no ga yadakara na. Futari kiri ni naru is to be alone with just one other person. He's referring to himself and a customer. I don't like it when it's just me and one other customer alone. He's not saying I don't like being here with just the 2 of you. He's not talking about them. And then, yeah, because Patron A misunderstood that that's what he was saying, Patron A then mistranslated sonna ryude as why is that? Again, if something isn't really making sense to you, and if, like, the follow-up line that comes after the thing doesn't really make sense, chances are you probably misunderstood or mistranslated the line that came before that. That's another thing to just look over that again and make sure that you got it the first time. Come back with a fresh brain, and then you might understand it. And then he says, here you go, thanks for waiting. Literally, that's what omatase is thanks for waiting. But yeah, it's just generic thing that a person says when they're, like, arriving at a scene or when they're presenting you with something. So you don't really need to translate it as thanks for waiting, although that is technically literally what it is. And then clunk. Clunk isn't quite the vibe for the gon. It's more like look at all of this food and look at how majestic it is. Patron B, is that why he agreed to do this? It's a little bit of a vaguer way of stating, is this why he wanted a date, or is this why he wanted a +1? But it's not wrong. It's just a vaguer way of expressing that thought. And then the guy says, yup. Yeah, is, it is often a way of saying yes in response to somebody. It can also be just a way of asserting yourself into a conversation, like, oh, here I am. But yeah, yep, I can't stand being left alone with a solo customer. Yeah, that's it. I like loom for zoom. I like that. That's the reason. I think an italicized that's would be nicer here. But yeah, that's the reason. Order up, here you go. I like that. I like order up for ai omatase. Here you go. Katink. Again, I think this gon is a little more grand of a sound effect than a clunk or a katink. Patron C, is that why he needed a date? Yeah, I think this is correct. It's a good way of expressing that. Aite, oh god, aite can be translated so many different ways. It can be a partner, it can be a date, it can be an opponent in a fight. It's a +1, it's another person. And date in this case, because that's literally what they're doing. They're on a date. And then the guy says, yep, it's because I don't want to be left alone with a customer. I like this rougher because this guy is just really creepy. And he does have this sort of slurred kind of speech. It's because I don't want to be left alone with the customer. Yep. Gloom. I like gloom. Loom and gloom. That's both good. Yeah, and then italicized. That's why? And then he says, welp, here you go. I like whelp for I, because I is sort of like a lazy, casual version of saying hi. It's like I can't be bothered to pronounce the H in hi, so I'm just going to say I. So it's like, welp, here you go. And then thunk. Again, maybe it's just me, but I think this gon, especially since it's a transparent gong, I think it's kind of this more gong, like this, oh, look at this giant plate of sushi, and it's all sparkling, and there's so much of it. Anyway, we're going to stop there for today. Tune in another week or two for the thrilling conclusion of my Let's Translate Manga of Tada no Mefure desu and the final episode of Let's Translate Manga on this channel for the indefinite future or forever. more info on that next week or next week, whenever I get around to uploading the next episode of this. Thanks to the patrons for participating in this and for the other patrons for supporting this channel and series in general. And I'll see you next time, perhaps, maybe